In this video, we're going to cover units of measure and how they work throughout the liftoff system. The unique way liftoff is designed units of measure will allow different users to use different units of measure in the way they want throughout the system without having to dumb it down to one unit of measure because of math needed to be done either in the warehouse, in the sales field, or at the counter. Units of measure allow each user to use the unit of measure that they're most familiar with, and also allows us to build a customer in the unit of measure that they want to see items in. In this page, we are looking at the product information page. One of the unique things about how we handle units of measure is that we can assign a group to several different products in our UOM group. Units of measure groups are assigned to each product, and you can have the same unit of measure group assigned to multiple products. In this case, we're looking at a 248DF, which is a 2x4x8 dug fir kiln dry. A 248DF would have the properties of a 248 piece of wood. We can also assign this same unit of measure group to 248 pine, 248 Doug, 248 Southern Yellow Pine. Any 2x4x8 product would have the same properties of a 248 Doug fir. In order to assign a UOM group, we can just edit it right here. We can do it through import-export. But let's explain how UOM groups work. One of the nice things is, in this UOM group, if I click on it here, it will take me right to the UOM group that's assigned to this product. First thing is we have a unit of measure group name, obviously the 248, which is what you saw on the page. We can also categorize our unit of measure groups. So this one's in the group lumber 2x4. It becomes easiest for us to find and manage unit of measure groups when we're looking for them throughout the system or maintaining them. The other thing is this is where we do our calculation. So the first part and the most important part is what is going to be your base, the first line that shows up. The base is always a 1-to-1 ratio. So in this case, we want our base to be piece. We're always going to sell it by the piece. We're not going to sell it in anything else than a piece. We're not going to buy it in anything lower than a piece. However, we can use different unit measures that are a portion of that piece. For example, we can say that one base is 8 lineal feet. Obviously, 8 lineal feet in a 2x4x8. The other thing is we say one piece equals 5.33 board feet. And one piece equals 0.005 thousand board feet. And we have 294 pieces, which is our base, that make up one pallet. This calculation can be done this way. It will allow you for 4 decimals of precision. If you wanted to get more precise when you get to more complicated lineal foot or 1,000 board feet calculations, you can increase the number of bases. So for example, if this was 0.00567, we can actually say 100 bases equals, and move this over, 0.567. And that would allow us for 6 or 7 decimals out of precision. But for now, we'll keep the calculation the same. The other thing to notice is over on the right here, we have where we want our defaults to show up. So for example, our base unit measure is obviously going to be piece. Our selling unit of measure, this is the quantity on a sales order. So if we jump over to a sales order, you see the selling unit of measure is lineal foot. If we go over to orders and quotes, and we look for our 2x4x8, the default would come out to lineal foot. In other words, I want to sell it by the lineal foot. But for example, I want to change it. In other words, my customer doesn't want to see how many lineal feet or how many board feet, etc. My customer wants to know how many pieces. You can simply click on the unit of measure, hit piece, and it'll tell you how many pieces. The other thing to notice is when I'm making this change is the items below in green will always be in your base unit of measure. In all of these different products, you can see they're different quantities. For example, in this GAF Timberline, it's 35.5 squares, but it's telling me that's 114 bundles, which is the base unit of measure related to the GAF. Same thing for our 18-inch R&R Primes shakes. We're doing a square calculation, but we know it's 128 boxes to get to that square. If we go back to our unit of measure, our pricing unit of measure, same thing. We can sell it in the quantity of lineal foot, but we can price it by the board foot. Stocking unit of measure, how do you want to stock it? When you take your physical inventory, what unit of measure do you want to use? When you're picking, this is your base unit of measure that you're going to show when you're picking. In other words, every time I pick it, I want to show this quantity on my pick ticket. So if we were going to sell this by the lineal foot, but when it goes out to my yard, they want to see how many pieces am I getting. Our purchase unit of measure, same thing. It could be piece, or we could change this to something like pallet. And say every time I buy this, I always want to buy it default to the pallet, so I don't have to calculate my pallet quantities. And my cost is always going to be by the 1,000 board foot, because that's what I get from my vendor. Receiving, again, the default on the receiving, what's it going to receive in? We can have it be the same as the purchase, so pallet. So if someone receiving can instantly see, I've got 3 pallets, just type in 3 and not have to do the individual counting, since we already know what that is. On our reporting unit of measure, what's our default? And then our inner and outer unit of measures are for future use, but for right now you can assign anything you want in those. The other thing to note in our UOM page is that we have this thing called picking hierarchy. Picking hierarchy comes into play when we start doing pick tickets. We can sit there and say, we want, even though our default picking unit measure is piece, when we go do the picking hierarchy, I want you to tell me how many pallets and then how many pieces. So for the yard, they would see an order that would come out and say, I want 3 pallets and 5 pieces versus saying 797 pieces. So let's go through some of the different areas that unit of measures will work. So we are back on our product page looking through, and if you notice up here, UOM type is piece. It is showing all of my pricing and costing and my quantities on hand, my default values, quantity allocated, everything is going to be by piece. If I wanted to work in a different unit of measure while on this page, I would just choose the drop down and say, you know what, I want to see what I have in board feet. So now a couple things change. All the items in purple have now changed to the board foot calculation. If you can see, my price is 0.75 per board foot here. If I change it back to piece, you notice it's $4 a piece. So depending on what unit of measure, if you're talking to your vendor and they price you by 1,000 board feet, you can instantly see what everything is in your 1,000 board foot pricing. Same thing down here. I have 8,000 board feet on hand. I have 0.7 allocated. This again is all done in the 1,000 board foot. So I bring this down to piece, which is generally what you're going to work in this unit of measure, which is the ability. The other thing we can do is, if you notice, my quantity on hand is telling me how many I have in pieces, but I can just hover over it and it'll also give me all my units of measure in that quantity. Same thing for my current market cost. I can quickly just hover over it and it'll tell me all the ones I have in each different quantity, as well as my weighted average cost. Just different areas that you can do. The other thing is, when you're doing your pricing, which will be covered in a different module in detail, but you can go over and look at the individual pricing for this product and you can see what it costs by piece based on your levels that you have set up, or if you want a lineal foot price, a board foot price, or 1,000 board foot price. You can see those quickly and easily by just checking. You don't have to do any calculations to get between the different units of measure. The other thing is, when you want to update quickly by one product, but you only have one of the prices, if you have 1,000 board foot price, you don't have to do the calculation. You can quickly come in and say, my M6 price is not 560 per 1,000 board feet. I want to change it to 555. And if I hit save, the system will go through, recalculate it, and now we're down to 555, and it calculated what that means in board feet, lineal foot, piece, does all those calculations for you right on the fly without having to change. So the user can import or export into any of these units of measure as well. So if your vendor gives you your price by 1,000 board foot, you can input that price, it will load it in here and do all your calculations for you to get back to where you need to be. So let's go through how we set up a unit of measure group and also how we get to it. So to get the unit of measure, you go to Product Management, Products, and you come down into Units of Measure. This is the Unit of Measure Management page. So the first thing you need to know is what categories. So if you remember in our 248 example, we put it in the category lumber 2x4. You can also create as many categories as you want. You can order them in whatever order you want. It's however you want to do it. The next thing you have to set up is, once you have your categories, now you have UOM types. These are the individual names that you use for units of measure. So if you see, we have bundle, pallet, truckload, square foot, lineal foot. Now if you notice, I do not have to abbreviate if I do not want to. So square foot does not have to be SFT. I can actually write out the word square foot. Lineal foot does not have to be LFT. I can write out lineal feet or lineal foot. You need to set up all of your different ones that you would like to use in the system. Again, it's as simple as just hitting add new, and let's say if we wanted to create one called box 2, we would just hit add, and it adds box 2 into the system, and then it's available to be used. Once you have your UOM types or your different names for your units of measure, we would then go in and create a group. So if we go in to create a group, first thing we do, let's set up a group for something that has 50 pieces per box. Very simple, straightforward. So the UOM group name, I would just type in 50 piece box. The next thing I do is, what do I want to put this in? Well, let's say this actually has to do with siding panels. So we can put it in that group. Or if it's not in a group at all, we can just leave it blank and we want to leave it out. So the first thing we're going to do is say, what's your base unit of measure? So in a 50 piece box, the base unit of measure obviously would be piece. I come to the drop down, I find piece, I select it. If you notice on the right, it took everything and put it in the piece unit of measure. So if we were just setting up the piece unit of measure, if you will, a single unit of measure, and that's all we want to call it, we would go to this point, add piece, just hit save, and we're done. But in this case, we want to sell it by the piece, but we also have a box quantity that we want to use. So if we hit add, it'll add another level, and then we say, well, there are 50 bases in one, and then here we would type in box. So now we have a UOM group set up, 50 piece box. Our base is our base is pieces, and then there are 50 of the base in one box. Now we come over here and say, well, the base obviously has to be piece, and if you notice, we cannot change it. But when we sell it, you know what? I always want to sell and default to the box. So we change our selling unit measure to box. How do we want to price it? Well, I want to price it by the piece. Our stocking unit measure is going to be piece. When I count it, I want to count the pieces. Obviously, my picking needs to be piece. My purchase unit of measure, well, I have to buy it by the box, so I'm going to change it to box. And my purchase cost is my vendor gives me a cost per box, not a cost per piece. So we put it to box. When we receive it, let's have them receive it by box. How do I want to report? Well, I want to see all my reports in pieces, go on how many pieces I have. And then again, inner and outer unit of measure are not used right now, but I would set them up logically where my inner is piece and my outer is box. The other thing I can say is, oh, by the way, I do want to use picking hierarchy when selecting this product. So if I send out 101 pieces to my guys, I want them to be able to know, hey, get 2 boxes and 1 piece. You don't want people trying to, get 101 boxes, which does happen sometimes. So the picking hierarchy is set in to which unit of measure do you want them to go to first, and then which one second. So if you notice, I just grabbed the box here and said, I put that on top, and I said, first tell me how many boxes I need, then tell me how many pieces I need. And then once you're done, you can hit save, create new, or save and view list. So in this example, I'm just going to hit save and view list. And it already tells me I have a 50 piece box, which is fine. If we go to our UOM group list, this is a listing page of all the different unit of measure groups you have. This is where you can go and search and say, what does it look like? Do I have it set up correctly or anything like that? And again, it works just like any other listing page in the system. The only thing is we don't limit the list. We just have the search feature up top. And the search feature, we can sit there and say, we want to search for 2x24, which will be my 2 4s in my group name, which is the name of the unit of measure group. If I search now you can see here's my 248, my 2410, 2412, 2414, etc., etc. I can jump right into look at that. If I want to look at what my 2410s look like, here we go. We have a couple things in my 2410. We have piece, we have lineal foot, we have board foot, 1000 board foot. And then one of the other unique things we can do is if you're doing takeoffs and you have lineal foot and you say I want to do 1.12 lineal foot a stud or 1.11 a lineal foot stud, we can actually use that calculation and say I have so many lineal feet, how many studs do I need? And the system will go through and say, oh, okay, this is the way you want to do it. You need so many lineal feet. How many lineal feet studs do you need? I need 1.12 for every lineal foot. Round it up and tell me how many pieces I need. And we can show that in a sales order. So once you have your unit of measure groups set up, you assign them to your products. And then the system will be able to do a couple different things within unit of measure. First one we did, obviously, was on the sales order. This is probably the place that it'll make the most sense. So in this sales order, I have a couple different products set up to show you how it would work. So the first one is GAF Timberline Charcoal HD. So let's look at what this unit of measure looks like. So if I go to the product page, it's a square 3 unit of measure group. So if I open up the square 3 unit of measure, I see one, my base is bundle. All right, there are 3 bundles in a square, 36 bundles in a pallet, and 225 in a truckload. My picking hierarchy is going to be pallets then bundles, because the yard doesn't care about squares. The yard doesn't care about truckloads. The yard only works in pallets and bundles. So if we go back to our orders and quotes page, we have this GAF Timberline charcoal. I'm telling the customer called me and said, I want 35.5 square. That's fantastic. And then he also said, and we want to price them by the square. But if the customer called back and said, oh, you know what, I need 15 bundles, I can instantly change this on the fly to bundle, change the number to 15, and the system will make the changes. And understand you want 15 bundles. It's still showing you in the square price. These two do not have to be the same. But I'm going to set this back up, and I'm going to say the customer actually called, and he wanted, 37 square. Or let's make it a little bit more fun, 39.5 square. So if you notice, as soon as I did 39.5, the system says, because it's divisible by 3, you can't have 39.5. You're actually going to have 39.6667 square. In our 248 example, we have the same thing. I have 441 pieces, but I'm pricing them by the board foot. So we can sit there and say, well, the customer, wants 441 pieces priced by the board foot. Again, he could call up and say, I need, 3,000 lineal feet. How many do I need? Or I need 3,120 lineal feet. So I put in 3,120 lineal feet. I hit enter. That actually worked out nice. If I said I need 3,121 lineal feet, it'll go through. If you need it, it said, no, you can't get 3,121. You have to get 3,128 lineal feet and 391. What the system is doing is saying that's how many you wanted, but your default was your lowest unit measure is base. You have to sell one base. So I can't tell you 3,121. I have to sell you 3,128. And as we referenced before, the bottom line is telling you that's 391 pieces, not 390. So you know how many pieces you're getting to that. If you sell products like R&R shakes, one of the difficult calculations of R&R shakes is depending on the exposure, how many boxes you need of those shakes. So one of the things we can do is we can put those calculations in so you know. And in this example, let's say the customer calls up and says, I'm using a 7.5 inch exposure. So I change my unit measure to 7.5, and he says, I want 32 square. So you can type in, he wants 32 of the square 7.5. We enter that in. It tells us, well, he's actually going to get 32.1062, and it's 119 boxes. So all those calculations that you have to go to the charts and figure out, we can embed in the system so that it goes through and shows you exactly how many you need. And again, we can take this back down a box and know that he wanted 32, he needs 119 boxes, and it'll show us 119 boxes. Again, we can tell him he wants to know what his price is. It was a 7.5 inch exposure. Well, it's $575 per square. But in this case, he's going to want to know the box. So you can work with this so your customer can see exactly what they want to see. Another thing you can do it is if you use paint or stucco or items of that nature, and your paint covers so many square feet or your stucco covers so many square feet, you can actually define how much a bucket would cover. Let's say for this example, we're using stucco E-finish quartz puts on Drive It. We know that one bucket covers roughly 120 square feet, and that's what we want to tell the customer. We're giving you the minimum requirement. Another unique thing we'll cover when we go through sales orders is this little hover. So you can see right there's a little hover note. When I see that red, it says this can cover 120 to 160 square foot per bucket based on thickness. And we are set to sell at 120 square feet per bucket. So in this example, the customer calls up and says, I need, 1,645 square feet is roughly what I need. We can actually put that in. It's going to say, well, you're going to get 1,680 square foot, and it's 14 buckets. And if we would change this back to bucket, you would see the unit of measure changes and stays with what it is. So he has 1,680 square foot. He wants to know roughly what's my square foot price. It's 86 cents a square foot is roughly what you're getting. But a bucket is 103.53. Once we've done all that, one of the nice thing is, if you notice, this is in square that the customer is going to see. This is in lineal foot. This is in square foot. That's all great, but when we go out to the yard, these are units of measure that they don't want to work in. They have no idea. So if we come down and we just view our pick ticket, some of the nice things that LBM Liftoff will do It's going to go through and do the calculations and bring up your pick ticket. If you notice now, on the first line item, where here we had 39.667 square that went out to the yard, nowhere on the line item does it tell them how many square we have. It says you need 119 bundle, and this ship and UOM are controlled by the UOM group, which says what is your picking unit of measure. So this is what it's going to show. You're getting 119 bundles of GAF Timberline charcoal. By the way, the pick hierarchy is telling you need 3 pallets and 11 bundles. So it's doing the math for them so they can go out to the yard and pick efficiently. Same thing with your 391 pieces of 248 Doug fir. Well, we know that's 1 pallet, 97 pieces, so that they don't have to go through and start counting. Other places this come into effect if you sell siding by the box or anything by the box. They don't have to cut open and figure out how many pieces are in different types of boxes, especially in siding when you have, D4 contains so many pieces, D5, if you have 16 footers that contain so many pieces. We can have all those calculations in and just tell them this is how many pieces, how many boxes, how many pieces, or pallet box piece. You can have as many hierarchies as you want inside the unit of measure. And then if you notice on the dry vidi finish, nowhere do we even mention bucket on our sales order. We said we had 1,680 square foot because that's what the customer wanted. And we can just sit there and say, well, that's 14 buckets. And by the way, 14 buckets is 1 pallet and 2 buckets. So this is just one of the ways that unit of measure can become easy and not have yards doing calculations based on what the sales order looks like, or the counter having to do calculations to get the pick tickets to look the way the yard wants. Everybody can work in the different unit of measure that they want to work in. Same thing will hold true on purchase orders. If we go inside our purchase order, and if you notice I have some of the same things, is in my GAF Timberline HD charcoal, well, I'm going to buy it by the pallet. I want to figure out how many pallets I need. I don't care about squares or bundles. I know that I want 10 pallets, and then I can have a square price because that's how my manufacturer gives it to me. Same thing with my 248. I'm going to know, I want 2 pallets. I'm not going to buy it by the piece. Now, at any time, just like in sales orders, I can sit there and change the unit of measure and say, that's 120 square. Oh, by the way, I want 245 square. So it'll go through, but then I go and see the pallet. It becomes, that doesn't work for my manufacturer. So I want to sit there and say, hey, you know what? I just want 20 pallets. And it'll go through and do the calculation. If you hit the little more information, the I button, it's telling you 20 pallets is 720 bundles, because that's your base unit of measure. Same thing when you're doing the framing lumber. You can order by the pieces, or you can just sit there and say, hey, I just want you to tell me how many pallets I need. And again, for plywood, something like that, you can either order by the piece, or I can change it to the pallet quantity, and I know it's pallets. So if I'm trying to put a truck together, and I know a truck, in this case, I have 24 pallets on the truck, and the truck can only hold 20 pallets, I can quickly go through and say, you know what, okay, it can only hold 20 pallets, so just make this 16 pallets and move on. So it's a quick way to use units of measure within purchase orders as well as sales orders. One of the final things to go through is, especially when we're doing our reporting or exporting some items, we can go through, this is our sales line item history. So to get to this, I would go to Data Tools, Sales Line Items. Inside Sales Line Items is a listing of all the sales lines that we have sold and have been invoiced. And one of the things a lot of people like to do is report on how many squares did this customer buy, how much lumber did this person buy, either by lineal foot, or I want to do it by square, or whatever unit of measure you want to report it. Well, one of the problems in a lot of the competitive systems, let's use roofing for example here, I have these line items. I have 25 of the landmarks, I had 20 of the landmarks, and I had 3 of the landmarks, and I have 5 of the HD slate and GAF. Well, when I export this, I don't know, did I sell them 25 bundles, 25 square, 25 pieces, 25 lineal feet? All of that doesn't make sense, and all these are in different units of measure and can be in different units of measure. So one of the nice things we can do is we can convert everything to the same unit of measure for that product and then export it out and do whatever type of calculations you want. So in this example, we have just basically quantity sold in the shingle department based on my filter. And then I say, you know what? I want to see everything in my selling unit of measure type. So if you notice on those first 5 line items, it goes through and says, oh yeah, it was 25 square, it was 20 square, it was 3 square. Oh, but that HD slate is 1.667 square because that was really sold in bundles. So the system will go out and say, this is what you want to do. You can choose which unit of measure you want to put it in. So if you want to see it in your base unit of measure, now it goes and changes that HD slate to say, oh, you sold 5 bundles of that. If you want to do it in your selling unit of measure, it goes out and does it in your selling unit of measure. So the system will convert it. You can export this and have how many squares, how many bundles, how many pieces, how many boxes, any unit of measure that you have set up for the item. You can actually combine all those items, and you can also look at sales history by master account. Again, this is just a filter that you can set up using our filters and listing pages. So there are a lot of unique things that we can do within unit of measure in the system. If you have any questions, please talk to your salesman or call your support desk. Thank you.